Hello guys, welcome to another video. The Lament of an Immortal, Worlds Collide by IAWWMS. Chapter 10 Talk Among Goddesses. A shimmering glow hovered in the Garden of Babylon as a divine aura began to be felt. Azusa, the immortal witch, had returned to the floating fortress. With a sad and downcast look, and some tears on her face, she was clenching her fists in frustration as she saw that she had failed in her task. The pain she could feel in her chest was growing more and more. Her pain was not only because she had failed, but because she felt she had failed Rimuru in trying to put him back on the right path. She had failed Tuya for trying to avoid conflict between them, and most of all, she had failed countless worlds. "Welcome back, Azusa," a sweet, calm voice was heard behind Azusa, which made her turn around as she heard the speaking of a perfect stranger who knew her name. "Who are you?" questioned Azusa as she wiped her tears as she saw the girl in front of her, a beautiful and smiling pink-haired girl dressed in a white robe and golden ornaments on her arms as well as a tiara crowning her head. "Right, let me introduce myself, I am the goddess of love, you can call me Karen," she said, approaching Azusa. "Tuya's older sister," she replied. As she kept looking at her, she could feel it, this goddess in front of her eyes was very different from the ones she had previously met. "That's right, but I didn't come here to talk about Tuya. I want to talk to you about something more important," she pointed out. "I don't have time to socialize, I have to talk to Tuya. I failed in my errand and the raids will continue. Rimuru doesn't listen to me," answered Azusa, worried. Her heart was shaking with despair. At that moment Karen, Tuya's self-appointed sister, took her in her arms. "You have to calm down, Azusa. If you continue this upset you will never be able to achieve your goal," she told her while placing Azusa's head on her left shoulder while caressing her head to reassure her, like an older sister comforting her little sister. "Relax and take a deep breath." Little by little Azusa's despair was disappearing, her heart was starting to beat normally, and her breathing was normalizing. She didn't know why the situation was happening, but receiving the affection of the goddess of love she was starting to feel a familiar calm, as if her beloved mother was comforting her. Why did you do it?" Azusa said somewhat calmly, as they parted. "Because you looked worried, it didn't need any other reason than that. You are the smallest goddess I have ever met. As far as I'm concerned you are like my little sister. It's natural for me to worry about my family, don't you think so?" replied Karen with a slight smile. "Is that you? Are you the goddess who gave Tuya the assignment to stop Rimuru?" questioned Azusa, somewhat surprised. "That's right, it's me, but it wasn't something I decided, it was something that came up," she answered her seriously. While looking into her eyes, Azusa could feel it, Karen wasn't lying, it wasn't her intention for them to face each other. "What do you mean? It was something that came up, I don't understand," she questioned her. "We'd better talk somewhere else," she told him, motioning for him to accompany her. They walked through the garden until they came to a small table, on which there was a teapot and some cookies in the center. "What is this place?" Azusa questioned, somewhat confused. "This place is my relaxation space, this is where she said, but remained silent for a moment. Then she continued, "Please sit down, so I can explain the situation to you." "So, what did you mean by that?" Azusa said, a little calmer. "I'll tell you," affirmed Karen while she took the porcelain cups and poured the tea. "Among the vast and infinite worlds that existed and will exist, all of them are governed by almost the same basic laws." "What do you mean by basic laws?" Azusa questioned, somewhat confused. "In the universe there are fundamental laws that should not be broken by us. One is that a soul is the unique essence of a being. No one should interfere with that. And just as each life is precious, each soul is unique. So trying to alter a soul is taboo among the gods. I don't know if I'm making myself clear." "You mean an individual like us should not alter a soul?" Azusa said, trying to understand. "Indeed, the soul is the core of every living being. They are all in constant transition through infinity. When a life perishes in one world, another life is born in another world. In some places in your world they called it past lives or reincarnation. However, it is nothing but a constant in the universe," he explained in a serene way. "Every living being? Does that include my?" Azusa said while touching with both hands her chest. "So that, every living thing, that includes human life, animal life, even spiritual beings, all are bound to this destiny," Karen reaffirmed. "Wait a minute, Rimuru has an ability that," Azusa pointed out, but was stopped by a quick comment from Karen. "Allows her to manipulate a soul. All the gods have it, Azusa, we are just not allowed to do it," she stated. "If we have the power to do it, why not?" Azusa questioned, somewhat annoyed. We also have the power to devastate a world if we wanted to, but we don't, at least not most of us. She stated, then let out a slight sigh. You think that's okay? That the gods would stick their hand into the mortal world every time something happens? Humanity has to take responsibility for itself, Azusa. We can't interfere in their lives. But I don't see the problem with. The soul has its limit to be in the mortal world. That's why the need for its life to end, so that a new life arises. That's how souls are maintained. Try to see the physical body and the soul as this bottle with juice, he explained as he took out a small bottle with a juice that seemed to be apple juice. The human body is the bottle and the time the soul will be in this world is the juice. Soon, Karen threw a little more than half of the juice towards a small plant that was on the side of them. Then she poured some tea in the bottle, filling it again. Now imagine that this tea is our divinity. This is what happens when you manipulate a soul, she pointed out. I don't understand you. If you poured more liquid into the bottle, it means you got more time back. Azusa stated, somewhat confused. Do you really believe that? Well, try the juice and tell me what you think, expressed Karen, and then continue with her explanation. Yes, it is logical that you see that we extend the life of a person. But that is not true. We dilute part of their time. That is what happens when someone tries to alter a soul. We dilute their soul with our power. It is not the same thing. In conclusion, my dear Azusa, we cannot stop the cycle of the souls. But Rimuru was able to use her power to make her close ones. Yes, his close ones were blessed by his power, that's true, but it doesn't make them immortal, it only makes them long-lived. Besides, not everyone desires an immortality. I think Tuya already told you the reason why he was left alone, or am I wrong? The souls of the 9 returned to the mortal world, but that was her decision, and Tuya accepted the decision made by the 9, even though it left him heartbroken. He looked the will of all of them. But why abandon Tuya? Azusa questioned. I can only tell you that they knew that Tuya's future was beyond what they thought, and that they would only be the first stepping stone in his life. What if the soul is diluted? Can it reincarnate? Can it return to the mortal world? Azusa questioned, somewhat intrigued, hoping to find a reassuring answer, for her mind were only one place, the memory of her daughters, and that the fact that Rimuru used his power to give them a human body. In some cases they become incomplete souls, and cannot easily return to the mortal world. Even sometimes these souls are stranded between one world and another with scarce memories of their last life. Besides, you try to find a soul in all the infinity, it would be, as you would say, a needle in a haystack. Nothing ensures that you find it right away. But my daughters, they were spirits and, she said, somewhat distressed. In normal situations, a spirit reincarnates into another spirit with vague memories of their previous incarnation. However, this Rimuru guy gave them human bodies at the time of their ascension, so I couldn't tell you what happened to them. I only know that in the spirit world they are not, which makes it more likely that they descended to the human world, he explained. And as Karen explained, Azusa went into doubt. Why are you telling me this? What is the purpose for this? Doubts that slowly overwhelmed her until words came out of her mouth. Why are you telling me this? I was already sure. I accepted that my daughters would never be with me again. Then you give me hope by saying that all souls reincarnate. And now you tell me to find out where my daughters are. That is very cruel. Azusa pointed out, somewhat annoyed, but with a feeling of sadness in her words. It's hard, but you had every right to know the truth, and the truth is not just the words I just told you. Karen pointed out somewhat firmly. What do you mean? For a god to elevate his status, he has to complete a ritual. In the case of Tuya, who will ascend as a god of the highest rank, will have a test greater than that of anyone. In normal situations the gods would be asked to do something related to their affinity. In my case it was to revive the flame of love between a couple of gods who are in constant discussion. The goddess of time and space was dedicated to correct anomalies of temporal waves. Situations of this type, however, the test that he has to follow, who will become the next god ruler of all, will be a test where his limits will reach the maximum, he pointed out, and after making a small pause to sip his tea. You mean Tuya's test will be where he will risk his life? I questioned, somewhat worried. For every divine affinity his test is the opposite of him. If Tuya will become the almighty god, then, Karen mentioned in a serious manner, will he have to face against the Rimuru? Is that why it was decided that he will fight against a demon king? I questioned, somewhat frightened. Not the demon king. Rimuru left that class a long time ago. The gods have qualified Rimuru as something beyond a common deity, Karen pointed out. What do you mean? Azusa questioned. The gods classified Rimuru as a higher deity, so it is imperative to stop him. was heard behind Azusa. It was Moroha, the goddess of the sword. And now in Tuya's current state, it would be impossible for him to stop him without help, and more so with the anger that Rimuru has been accumulating after the last events, Karen pointed out. Well, we have to help him, he couldn't carry that alone, stated Azusa, trying to convince both goddesses, but their answer was two sighs in unison. Believe me, it's not that we don't want to. I tried to stop the conflict before it went any further, but I failed. I was authorized to try to make a contact, but it worked for us, affirmed Moroha. That's why the gods forbade us to interfere in it. We are deities and we cannot interfere in the battle. We are governed by celestial rules. Now Tuya is the divine being who is still bound by the mortal world. That is why he was given that assignment, but, Karen pointed out. But, Azusa said, intrigued. He is not the only divine being who is still bound by the mortal world, affirmed Moroha. You mean? Then Karen stood in front of Azusa, gave her a smile and took her hands as she clasped them together. My dear Azusa, the one they once called the Witch of the Highlands. Just like Tuya, your ascension test is about to begin. In a faraway world, where advanced high technology reigned, and magic and mystical creatures were just a mere fantasy of ancient writings, the roar of an incessant alarm was heard, shaking thousands of scientists. Is this real? How? But it's impossible, said one of them in amazement, seeing the images detected by one of their probes near the nearest star. It's not only real, it's being transmitted live. That being has been in front of that white dwarf for more than 20 minutes, said the other one. While little by little the image began to become clearer, a being smaller than an average adult, with two black wings and a peculiar mask that covered its face, was in front of that star. Suddenly a roar emerged from the being. The roar was so great that the star instantly went into reaction, becoming a supernova, exploding, causing the void to light up. In that immediate instant the probe stopped giving signal. Search the database, and send another probe to that quadrant. We have to corroborate what caused the star to detonate in that solar explosion, and put on replay the last moments prior to the incident. Apparently that creature was the cause, but I want to be sure, expressed the scientist, very astonished. Transmitting, we will use a sound filter to reproduce it, pointed out the equally astonished companion. However, what they heard only left them with more doubts. For as if a regret was felt, the roar became clearer and the two scientists were speechless as they clearly heard the repetition. The regret, the melancholy, the pain of a being rumbled in infinity. AZUSAAA was heard in the pre-supernova recording, and so, for the next rising deity, the road would be much thornier than imagined.